My name is Marvin Kowalski. I'm 57 years old, and for 12 Thanksgivings in a row, I was the man who paid for the dinner that everyone said I had a habit of ruining. Last November, I was standing in my daughter's side yard, arms full of folding tables I'd driven over to drop off, when I heard my son-in-law's voice carry through the screen door. He was on the phone, easy and loud the way he always is. "Becca runs the whole thing," he said. "The old man comes too, but honestly, he's more of a liability than anything. Yeah, we keep inviting him. What are you gonna do with these people?" He said it the way you'd mention a leaky faucet you hadn't gotten around to fixing. I stood there with those tables in my arms, and something that had been running quietly in the background for 12 years just shut itself off. I set the tables down against the fence. I drove home, and for the first time in 12 years, I let my family find out what happened when I wasn't there to pay for it. By 5 o'clock that Thursday, my phone was lighting up the kitchen counter, like a small fire I had no intention of putting out. But I'm getting ahead of myself. You need to understand how it started. Things like this never start with one bad day. They start with something that looks exactly like love. My wife Joyce passed 12 years ago. Pancreatic cancer, fast and merciless, the way that kind always is. She was 44. She had barely hung the last of the autumn decorations when she got the diagnosis, and by the following November she was gone. Joyce loved Thanksgiving the way some people love a religion. Not the food especially, though she was a fine cook. She loved the gathering of it, the tables pushed together, the noise, the kids running through the house in their socks. She used to say that the whole point of a family was showing up for the same meal and arguing about football afterward. I thought that was the funniest thing I'd ever heard. So when that first Thanksgiving without her arrived and my daughter Rebecca said we should still do it, Mom would want us to, I agreed without thinking twice about who would pay for it. We were all just trying to stay upright that year. I wrote a check to the Riverside Event Center on Millbrook Road. 52 people, catering included, the whole evening, just under $3,800. I told myself it was a one-time thing, a tribute to Joyce. That was 12 years ago. By year 3 it had a structure. Rebecca had a planning sheet. By year 5 she had a vendor list. By year 7 she had a binder with tabs. And every October, without anyone ever sitting down and deciding this was the permanent arrangement, I would start receiving the invoices, the event hall, Henderson Family Catering, same company for 9 years running, the rental outfit that brought the long tables and white linens, the florist for the centerpieces which my daughter picked out and I paid for. I paid them all, filed the receipts in a manila folder in the spare bedroom, and showed up on the 4th Thursday of November and sat wherever I was told to sit. I want to be careful here because my daughter is not a villain in a simple story. Rebecca genuinely loves organizing things, and she is good at it. She has her mother's eye for how a room should look and feel, but she also has a habit, and I couldn't tell you where she got it, because it wasn't from Joyce and it wasn't from me, of standing at the center of something and forgetting to look down at the floor she's standing on. The pattern I kept not seeing for 12 years was embarrassingly simple. Every year, right around the end of the gathering, something would happen that became my fault. In year 4, I told an old-fashioned joke that didn't land, and Rebecca spent the next 2 days describing to her cousin how I always made things uncomfortable. In year 6, I fell asleep in a chair before dessert because I'd worked a long stretch that week, and somehow by the next morning this became evidence that I didn't appreciate the effort everyone put in. In year 9, I got into a disagreement with my son-in-law Lance about a contractor he'd recommended who had overcharged me and done poor work. I said so plainly once at the table. The story that circulated afterward was that I had caused a scene and made Lance feel unwelcome in his own family. His own family. That one I've carried longer than I should have. The morning after year 9, Rebecca called in her soft voice, the one she uses when she needs something. "Dad, you know how Lance gets about criticism. He just feels things deeply. The catering bill came in a little high this year. You think you could cover the overage, just to smooth things over?" I said yes. Of course I said yes. What else do you say when your daughter tells you that you caused a problem, and here is the exact dollar amount required to repair it? I never connected those two things until year 11. Sitting at my own kitchen table after everyone had gone home, I started counting. Every single year I had done something wrong, or been told I had, and every single year a bill had followed the day after. Year after year, gentle and apologetic, smooth and regular as a lease payment. I sat with that and told myself, maybe I was being uncharitable. Maybe the overages were real. Maybe I had genuinely become difficult to be around. Grief does things to a man's edges. Maybe I was the problem and just couldn't see it. Then year 12 happened, and I heard Lance on the phone, and I stopped wondering. You should know the people the way I know them. Lance is 37, sells commercial insurance for a firm in Columbus, and is very good looking in the way of a man who is constantly aware that he's good looking. His handshake is just a little too firm. He talks over people so smoothly that most folks don't notice they've been interrupted. He called me sir for the first 2 years of his marriage to my daughter, and then quietly stopped. I noticed the day I realized I couldn't remember the last time he'd done it. Rebecca is 34 and works in hospital administration, and is sharper than she has ever given herself credit for. She could run the whole floor if she spent less energy managing how things appeared to other people. My daughter can walk into a room and immediately understand the social geography of it. It's a genuine gift. She just turned it inward too much and outward too little. My son Jonah is 30. He does construction framing, comes home dirty, doesn't apologize for it. He is the kind of man you want beside you when something goes wrong, because he doesn't flinch and he doesn't perform. He was the only person at any of those Thanksgiving tables who was always plainly and unmistakably on my side, even when he couldn't say it out loud. My sister Dolores is 60 and lives 40 minutes north, and she had been watching this situation develop for at least 6 years with her mouth mostly shut, because she told herself it wasn't her family to manage. When she finally did open her mouth, she didn't waste a word. Now, year 12. I'd been to a cardiologist in October. Routine follow-up, nothing dramatic, but he showed me some numbers I didn't love and used the word strain in a way that made clear he wasn't talking about a pulled muscle. He told me to cut back on heavy lifting and reduce stress wherever I could. I nodded and thanked him and drove home and stood in the cereal aisle at the grocery store for 10 minutes, not thinking about much of anything, which I've since come to understand is what shock feels like when you've spent a lifetime being a steady man. 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, Rebecca called to go over logistics. She needed me to confirm the linen order. She needed me to call the catering company about a vegetarian option someone had requested. She needed the deposit check to Riverside by end of week. I wrote it all down. I was going to handle it. 4 days before Thanksgiving, I drove over to drop off the folding tables she'd asked to borrow from my garage. Her car was in the drive. Lance's, I thought, was gone, but it was just pulled around the side. I came around the back with the tables under my arms and heard him through the screen door. He was at the patio table, phone to his ear, back to me, facing the yard. Becca runs the whole thing. She's incredible at it. A pause listening. The old man comes. He sits there half the time he's got something sideways to say. Last year he got into it with me in front of everybody. Another pause. Yeah, we keep inviting him. He's her dad. What are you going to do with these people? He said it the way you'd describe a maintenance problem you'd stopped expecting to get fixed. I want to be exact about what I felt in that moment, because I've thought about it every day since. It wasn't rage. Rage I could have walked through the door with. It was something quieter and older. Something that had been sitting at the back of a shelf for 12 years and just slid off. I could see the whole shape of it clearly. The way you can suddenly see the frame of a painting you've been looking at too long and too close. I set the tables down against the fence. I walked back to my truck. I drove home without the radio on. That night I pulled out every vendor contract from the past 12 years. The event center, the catering company, the table and chair rental, the linen service, the florist, every single one. And on every single one, in the box marked account holder or primary contact or billing name, was the same name, mine, Marvin Kowalski, not Rebecca, not Lance, not even Joint, mine alone every time. To everyone who sat at those tables for 12 years, Thanksgiving had simply appeared. Becca handled everything. That was what Lance had told his friend. That was what I imagined was said at work, and to the neighbors and anywhere someone complimented the evening. Becca handles everything. What Becca had handled for 12 years was telling me what to order. I sat at the kitchen table and did the math I'd been avoiding. 12 Thanksgivings. The event hall averaged $2,400 a year. Henderson's catering ran between $1,500 and $22. Rentals, linens, flowers. Another $800 in a good year. Gifts I'd brought to the gathering that went home in other people's bags with other people's names attached. I won't say the full number out loud, but stretched over 12 years, it represents a retirement cushion my cardiologist would have been very glad to know I had. I didn't build that cushion. I built someone else's reputation. The next morning, I made 4 phone calls over about 45 minutes. I started with the Riverside Event Center. A woman named Valerie answered, the same coordinator I'd worked with for years. I told her I needed to cancel my reservation and remove my payment from the account going forward. Mr. Kowalski, you've been with us a long time. I know, I said. This isn't about the hall. If my daughter Rebecca Thurber wants to keep the date, she can call and book it in her own name, on her own card. I'll give you her number. I don't want to leave anyone without a venue. I'm just taking my name off the bottom of it. I made the same call to Henderson Family Catering, to the rental company, to the florist. Same words, more or less. I'm removing my name and my payment. If my daughter wants to keep the order, she calls you herself. Every vendor was professional and kind about it. The woman at the catering company asked if everything was all right. I told her it was going to be. It took less than an hour. 12 years of automatic payments, undone over a cup of coffee I didn't even finish. Jonah came by that afternoon after his shift, work boots on the back steps the way they always are. He stood in my doorway and looked at me for a second. Something happened, he said. Not a question. So I told him everything. Lance on the phone, the contracts, the phone calls, plain and in order. He sat down at my kitchen table and put both hands flat on the surface and stared at them. When he looked up, the edges of his eyes were red. I should have said something years ago, he said. Every time I tried to bring it up around Becca, she'd just redirect, change the subject, make me feel like I was reading too much into things. You were one voice, I said. He shook his head slowly, then he pulled out his phone, scrolled for a moment, and turned the screen toward me. A text from Rebecca, sent about 2 years back during a stretch when I'd been quieter than usual. Probably not my best self at gatherings. She had written to Jonah, Dad's becoming a problem. He's been off for 2 years and nobody wants to say it. Honestly, the only reason we keep inviting him is because of the kids. He'd be devastated if he knew. I read it twice. The only reason we keep inviting him is because of the kids. You kept it, I said. I don't know why. I should have called her on it at the time. He took the phone back. I'm deleting it right now. I don't want to carry it anymore. He did it right there at my table. We don't win this by throwing her own words back at her. We win it by being the people she said we weren't. I told him I understood completely. If you've ever been the one who quietly carried your family, the one who paid and fixed and smoothed things over and got treated like it was nothing, I hope you'll tell me in the comments how long it took you to finally see it. Because I'll be honest with you, I almost didn't, and what comes next almost didn't happen. Stay with me. Rebecca called the following evening, organized and matter-of-fact at first, going through the final list. Then she got to the part where she needed me to confirm the headcount with Riverside. I won't be doing that, I said. I won't be coming to Thanksgiving this year, Becca. I've taken my name off all the vendor accounts. If you want to keep the gathering going, you'll need to call them yourself and set it up in your own name. The silence had a texture to it. What do you mean, your name? Every contract for the past 12 years is in my name. The hall, the caterer, the rentals. I've been the account holder and the one paying every time. I've removed myself from all of it. Valerie at Riverside can walk you through what you need to do to rebook. Her voice climbed. You can't do this 2 weeks out. The grandkids are expecting. Do you understand what you're doing? You're going to blow up Thanksgiving over some hurt feelings? Not hurt feelings, I said, and I kept my voice the way I'd learned to keep it on job sites for 30 years. I'm done paying for a gathering where I'm treated like a guest nobody actually wants. That's all. Call Valerie tomorrow. She books up fast this time of year. I told her good night. I meant it. Then I set the phone down and watched it start to light up again. By the next morning, she'd called in family reinforcements. An aunt on Joyce's side, 2 cousins I heard from twice a year in normal times, a family friend who wanted to check in. Every message had the same code on. We're worried about you, Marvin. This isn't like you. Don't let pride do this to the family. Think about the grandkids. One cousin left a voicemail that used the word selfish, and then seemed to catch herself halfway through and walked it back, which somehow made it worse. The guilt was a real thing. I won't pretend otherwise. 12 years of conditioning knows exactly which door to use, and it used it. My thumb actually moved toward Rebecca's name in my contacts. Then Dolores called, and I picked up on the second ring, because Dolores doesn't call unless she means it. I've been watching this for 6 years with my mouth shut, she said, skipping the hello entirely. Don't you dare fold now. You hold your ground. My hands were shaking, I told her, which was true. Mine would be too, she said. Shake and hold anyway. I've got you. I didn't call Rebecca back. Lance showed up instead. Friday night, headlights in the drive, a knock that was a little too heavy for a polite visit. He stood in the doorway in his nice jacket, jaw set. You're putting Becca in an impossible position, he said. No hello, I said. Come in. He didn't. You made a commitment, every year, same deal. You don't just yank the rug out because you had a bad day. What commitment did I make, Lance? That slowed him down for half a second. You always pay. Everybody knows that. Everybody assumed that, I said. There's a difference. Every contract has a name on it. Mine, I've removed it. If Rebecca wants the gathering, she books it herself. He stepped forward the way men like Lance do when they're used to rooms shifting around them. This is an embarrassment to this whole family. You understand that? The vendors have been very professional, I said. I walked to the door and held it open. Cold November air came in. Drive safe. He left, he had to. There's nothing left for a man like that to say to a man who has simply run out of yes. Thanksgiving morning, I stood at the kitchen window with coffee and watched the sky go gray then pale. Somewhere across town, Riverside was being set up for a party I'd always funded and was no longer attending. I made a turkey breast, enough for 2 because Jonah was coming. We'd decided that together, quietly, without making a production of it. At 4:47 in the afternoon, my phone lit up with the first call, the catering company. I let it ring, then the event hall, Valerie's office line, then her cell, then Rebecca, then Lance, then Rebecca again. The phone barely had time to go dark between calls. I set it face up on the kitchen table and watched it light the room while Jonah and I ate and talked about a fishing trip we'd been meaning to take for 2 years. At 5:22, Dolores called. I picked up. You need to come down here. Her voice was low and level, but something was running underneath it. I've already said everything I have to say. This isn't about repeating yourself. A pause. In the background I could hear the party. Voices, the clink of dishes, a social hum gone slightly wrong. Your daughter is about to find out what it costs to stand on her own for the first time. And the neighbors are right there. You earned the right to be in the room when the truth comes out. Don't give that away by sitting in your kitchen. I looked at my coat on the hook by the door. You're not going to pay anything, Dolores said, reading the silence the way only a sister can. You're going to be seen. There's a difference. I picked up my keys. I left my wallet on the counter on purpose. I drove over with nothing in my pockets. The Riverside Event Center parking lot was full, warm light in the windows, the smell of food and a family gathering that looked from the outside exactly like every other year. I pulled open the front door. The room turned. Rebecca was near the beverage table, and she was not the composed hostess she'd been an hour before. She was pale in a specific way, the way a person goes pale when a number they've never had to look at is sitting in front of them on paper. Valerie stood nearby with a folder. 2 of the Callahans from down the block, the same neighbors I'd heard Lance brag to about how well Rebecca ran everything, were close enough to have caught most of the conversation already in progress. Lance stood a few feet behind his wife, with the look of a man who has just realized he is no longer controlling the room. Rebecca saw me. Relief crossed her face, the old reflex, Dad is here, Dad will handle it. Dad. She stepped toward me, voice pitched just slightly for the room. Tell them there's been a misunderstanding. Tell them you'll get this sorted. I stood just inside the door, with the cold still on my jacket, and looked at my daughter. There's no misunderstanding, I said. I didn't raise my voice. You rarely need to. I just stopped paying for a room I was never really welcome in. Her expression sharpened. You're doing this again. You always do this. You find a way to make yourself the center of everything. And there it was, 12 years of that phrase, worn smooth by use. I didn't ruin anything tonight, I said quietly. I just didn't pay for it. Valerie, doing her job, filling a silence that had grown uncomfortable, looked between us and said what she needed to say. I'm sorry to interrupt. I want to make sure I have the account situation straight for our records. She paused. In all 12 years, your family has held Thanksgiving here. The booking and the full payment have always come from one name, Mr. Kowalski's. She looked at Rebecca, not unkindly. This is the first year the reservation came through someone else, and I do still need to settle tonight's balance. The room didn't need me to add a word. I watched it do the math. Watched the Callans, who'd heard Lance take credit for this gathering more than once, look slowly toward the chair that had apparently been sitting at the edge of the room, with my name on it for 12 years. Watch cousins who had called me selfish a week ago look at their plates. Jonah stepped out of the crowd. He hadn't told me he was coming. He stood in the middle of the room without performing. I want to say something since we're all here. His voice was steady. For as long as we've been doing this, the story going around was always the same. Dad was the problem. Dad made things awkward. Dad showed up and found something wrong with everything. He let that sit. Nobody mentioned that the man who supposedly ruined Thanksgiving was the only reason any of us had one. He paid for all of it. This hall, that food, the flowers on the tables. His voice caught for just a moment, and we let him sit by the door and told each other he was difficult. A few people looked at the floor. One of the cousins who'd left me that voicemail quietly set down her drink. Dolores moved to the center of the room. She didn't raise her voice. She never has to. I've watched this for 6 years and kept my mouth shut because I told myself it wasn't my place, she said. That was my mistake. She looked directly at Rebecca. Your father is not the man who ruined Thanksgiving. He's the man who has quietly given every person in this room something to show up to, while you let people tell each other he was in the way. Rebecca's mouth opened. For the first time I could remember, the room didn't rush in to fill her silence with something kinder. No soft laugh, no gentle redirect. The silence belonged to her now, all of it. I let it sit. Then I spoke, because some things a man should say himself. I'm not here to shame anybody, I said. That's not why I came. I looked at the room, the neighbors, the cousins, the people I'd fed for 12 years, without a single one of them knowing it was my name on the check. I loved doing this in the beginning. Keeping Thanksgiving was how I held the family together after Joyce died. I told myself that if I kept the gathering going, I could keep us whole. That was the deal I made in my own head. The grief moved, quiet and familiar. But somewhere along the way, I started believing the only way to stay in this family was to pay for it. And once you believe that, people will let you do it forever. I looked at my daughter. I'm not angry with you, but I am done paying to be treated like I don't belong here. I kept my voice even and level, the way I had on job sites for 30 years. Here's how it works from now on. Whoever hosts, pays. That's only fair. And me, I'll still come, if I'm wanted as a father. Not as a checkbook. I walked toward the door. The November air came in cold and clean when I opened it. Not one person reached for my arm to smooth things over. Driving home, I felt something I hadn't felt in longer than I could name. The particular lightness of a man who was no longer pretending. Jonah called late that night to tell me what happened after I left. Rebecca had put part of the balance on a card and set up a payment plan with Valerie for the rest. The gathering broke up early, the way gatherings do when the air goes out of a room. The Callahans went home with information they hadn't arrived with. By the following week, the story circulating in the neighborhood had shifted. Not Marvin ruined Thanksgiving. Something closer to, did you know her father paid for every one of those parties, while they told everyone she organized them herself? One cousin called to apologize, stumbling not quite direct, but she tried, and I let her. I'm not in the business of holding shame over people who are genuinely trying. Lance got quiet in a specific way. The kind of quiet a man gets when the neighbors he's been performing for now know the score. He'd spent years building a certain image on that block. He'd spent it in one careless phone call through a screen door. 3 days after Thanksgiving, Rebecca came over alone. She sat at my kitchen table with her coat still on for a while before she said anything. Valerie pulled up the account history on her computer. She finally said, year by year, going all the way back, your name, every single time. She turned her coffee cup in her hands. I don't have a good explanation. It was always just handled. You always handled it. I never had to think about the number, so I didn't. I made it easy not to, I said. That's on me too. She looked at the table for a moment. I said things about you, to Jonah, to other people. I called you a liability. Her voice dropped. I let Lance say things and I didn't correct him. I knew what she was referring to. I didn't tell her I knew. I'm 34 years old, she said, and I genuinely don't know how to plan an event I have to actually pay for. I've done this for 12 years, and I've never once had to look at the number at the bottom of the page. You'll learn, I told her. It's not too late. After she left, the old voice came back, the soft, reasonable one that sounds exactly like love and has cost me a significant part of my retirement. She came to you. She's trying. Cover the rest of that balance. Set something aside for next year. What's money for if not your kids? I opened my banking app. I sat with my thumb over the screen for what felt like a long time. My phone buzzed. A text from Jonah. Don't, Dad. Whatever you're thinking about doing right now, don't. A second later, Dolores. If she asked you for money tonight, the answer is the same as it's been all month. I closed the app without doing a thing. That was the hardest moment of the whole year. Not standing up to Lance, not walking into that room. The hardest moment was sitting alone in my kitchen and not rescuing my daughter from something she needed to learn. Because that voice, the soft one that says just this once, just smooth it over, that voice isn't love, it's the hook, and I'd been on it for 12 years. Thanksgiving the following year looked nothing like the 12 before it. We had it at my house. I made Joyce's turkey recipe, checking her handwritten card at every step. Jonah brought his girlfriend Petra, who shook my hand like she meant it and asked about my work like it mattered. Dolores came early and stayed late and reorganized my pantry without asking, which felt exactly right. Rebecca came with a green bean casserole she had made herself, a little overdone at the edges, and she came with no binder, no clipboard, no assignments. Just my daughter, quieter than I'd seen her in years, asking if she could help set the table. Things weren't fixed. I want to be honest about that. You don't undo 12 years over one turkey. There was a carefulness between us, a tenderness with bruising still beneath it. She and Lance were working through things of their own that I didn't ask about, and she was learning, genuinely learning, what it meant to stand on her own financially. She had organized a birthday party for her kids that fall and paid for the whole thing herself. And she'd called to tell me about it the way you call someone when you want them to be proud of you. I was. That evening I sat at the head of my own table, not because I'd paid for it, because my family put me there. Late, after Jonah had washed the dishes he'd insisted on washing, and Dolores had driven north with half the leftovers, Rebecca found me at the window. We stood there and watched the dark yard together for a minute. I owe you more than I know how to say, she said. I'm not going to try to get it all right tonight. You don't have to, I said. Just one part. She turned toward me. Thank you. For all those years I never said it, I never even saw it. I'm sorry it took losing it for me to finally see you. No request writing at the end of it. No balance due, no project. Just my daughter, 12 years late, and meaning every word. I'd waited a long time to hear it. Longer than I'd admitted, even to myself. I forgive you, I said, not because she had paid some debt back in full, but because carrying it was heavier than setting it down, and I had been carrying things that weren't mine for a very long time. She cried a little. I put my arm around my daughter, and for the first time in over a decade, it didn't cost either of us a thing. Here is what I know now, and I'll say it the way I wish someone had said it to me at 40. You cannot pay your way into belonging. You can only pay your way into being used. The morning I removed my name from those accounts was the morning I started taking my own life seriously. That is not a small thing. At 57, with a heart under strain and a retirement thinner than it should be, it is not a small thing at all. I keep what's mine now. I earned that right. Everybody went home eventually. Jonah and Petra, Dolores with her foil-covered dishes, Rebecca with her kids bundled into their car seats. I stood in the doorway and watched the taillights disappear into the dark. Then I went back inside, turned off the little string of lights I'd put up for the first time since Joyce died, and stood for a moment in the quiet of a house that had been full of the right people for the right reasons. For 12 years I had kept Thanksgiving by paying for it. This year I kept it by being worth showing up for. I turned off the last light and went to bed a free man.